They're beautiful animals, they've got their interesting characters. You know, they have as much right to be here on the planet as we do.
Unfortunately, despite all the voluntary effort in looking after dormice since the early 1990s, their numbers are still plummeting. Nationally, in those 40-odd years, they've gone down 70%. We are still in a position where dormice in the UK are teetering on the edge of extinction. They are a part of the nature in this countryside.
That connectivity has to be restored. You get that right, then experience shows that actually we can successfully reintroduce dormice into landscapes where they used to be, but have now disappeared.
It was really amazing to see the wildlife crossing the bridge for the first time.
And so it has become what we wanted it to be, which was a wildlife corridor to maintain populations of dormice across what was a dual carriageway.
It shows that if you do build a connected bridge for animals over a main road, they do actually use it.
People like dormice, and it's a lovely thing to be involved with.
So we have some dormice that came to us in the autumn from rescue centres. Our vet checks them over for any signs of illness, injury, abnormalities, who are looking for any diseases or parasites that they might be carrying. We carry out regular health checks of our dormice where we're looking to make sure their teeth are okay and not overgrown, because that could stop them from eating. We check their eyes to make sure they're nice and clear. We also look through their fur, so we're looking to see if they've got any parasites such as mites or fleas or lice. So dormice coming in from the wild can be very badly injured or dehydrated. They can be very underweight if they haven't been able to feed. They do need a lot of initial care to get them back on their feet. And they come into captivity for various reasons. Sometimes people's cats catch them. Sometimes gardeners will cut down trees that might have a nest inside it, or trim a hedge and the nest actually is destroyed and the babies fall out, and so they need to be hand reared. And we have a really good relationship with our local rescue centres, so they often do the initial care of the dormice and then pass them on to us so that we can rehabilitate them. We would only keep animals if our vet thinks that they are no longer in pain and have a good quality of life and they've recovered fully from these injuries. I feel really privileged to be able to work with dormice any day of the week. It's a species that lots of people would love to see in the wild, but very rarely do. It's just amazing to see them. They're beautiful animals, big back, bulgy eyes, bushy tail, golden coats. When you handle them, they just sort of curl up in a ball, particularly when they're in torpor or in hibernation. And so the sort of cute R factor with dormice has never worn off for me, even though I see them several times a week. So I do feel really, really privileged to be able to be working with them and to be making a difference to their populations as well. So the length of time that the dormice are with us really depends on their age and the particular year. So if we have a shortage of animals for the reintroduction programme that year, or a particular sex of animals, we might use the animals for the next reintroduction. They have to be under 2 years old to be released. The dormice have suffered a 70% decline since the year 2000 in the UK. So we need to breed dormice to try to reintroduce them back into the woodlands where they used to occur. We work closely with the People's Trust for Endangered Species on the Dormouse National Reintroduction Programme. What we try to do is put them into sort of clusters of woodland so that we have several woodlands near to each other which are linked by hedgerows and tree lines, and so the dormice then have a much better chance of colonising the whole landscape rather than if we just put them in one isolated woodland. And where we have new bloodlines of dormice, we put two unrelated animals together, a male and a female, at the start of the breeding season. And they have an enclosure to themselves, and then we monitor them during the year to see if they produce any young. In April, We will go into the enclosures and look for dormice, and sometimes we might have to very gently wake them up from hibernation. So we'll dig up their hibernation nests and move them indoors where they wake up gradually. And then we transport the dormice to London Zoo or Paynton Zoo, where they go into the quarantine period for their health checks before release. It's really important that we have habitat restoration projects, because there's no point releasing dormice into the wild if the habitat's not suitable, because they're just going to become extinct again. Dormice that like dense undergrowth, coppicing woodlands can let more light into a woodland, and that is really beneficial to woodland flowers like wood anemones and bluebells. So restoring a habitat for dormice benefits lots of other species.
Hedges are true reservoirs of life. If we didn't have them, then our farmland, much of our countryside, would be far less rich in wildlife than it is at the moment. We have far fewer hedges now than we used to. After the last World War, after about 1945, there was a real push for increased food production. Farm horses are being phased out, tractors come in, and tractors needed bigger fields than the horses did. So that drive for food production and new mechanisation of farming meant between a quarter and a third of hedges were removed. And those green or ploughed fields, there's very little space for wildlife there. It's inhospitable, it's a desert for most species. Animals need their habitats to be well connected to one another. They need to be able to move through the landscape to find new places to breed, new places to find mates. If you just have a little tiny habitat patch, then the organisms are obviously isolated and will eventually die out. What the hedges therefore do is provide a huge amount of extra habitat for the dormice in a landscape. The dormice don't like crossing gaps. Even gaps of about 5 metres can provide quite a substantial obstacle, because they're afraid they'll get eaten by some predator if they cross that gap. So you need your hedges to be really well connected to have a good, stable dormouse population. Fortunately, there's a lot of good work being done at the moment across our farmland to improve the condition of our hedges. Not only are new hedges being planted all over the place, but also hedges are started to be brought back into the management that they need to receive. On New Year's Day 2011, I started to record the number of species in this very hedge beside me now. And I carried it on for 2 years, recording every single plant, animal and fungus I could find in that hedge. And with a great deal of help from experts, identifying them all, found in the end the staggering 2,070 species. They're excellent wildlife habitat. They are highways along which animals move from one good habitat patch, say a woodland, to another one. But probably more important than that is they're actually habitats in their own life, places where many, many plants and animals can complete their whole life cycle. So they're important places for animals to breed, to nest. They're also important for places for shelter and shade. And on top of all that, of course, they provide a lot of food. So it could be leaves for caterpillars, or it could be flowers for bumblebees.
The land bridge is important at Scotney because it was the first land bridge for conservation ever put in the UK. I thought it was important to understand whether, having spent all this money to put this land bridge in, was it being used by the dormice? Otherwise, we're just wasting our money. As I started here in 2010, I had dormice boxes spread out across quite a wide area, but importantly I had them either side of the land bridge and 10 boxes on the land bridge. So for 2010 I was finding dormice on the western side of the land bridge but not on the eastern side, and I wasn't finding them on the land bridge either. So 2011 that pattern was repeated, and then hallelujah, in September 2012 we found a female mother dormouse. So the logic was, since we hadn't found any on the east side, they must have crossed the bridge. So this was fantastic because this is what we were all hoping for. So it has become what we wanted it to be, which was a wildlife corridor to maintain populations of dormice across what was a dual carriageway. So not only had that bridge showed that they could cross there, but it showed that if you had the habitat either side of the bridge, then they would join up with a population that was already there, which is important because it meant that there was genetic diversity. They are a part of the nature in this countryside. If we want to maintain a thriving habitat of biodiversity, then they're a small part of it. There are lots of species I could spend my time on, but I choose to spend them on dormice. They are my teachers. They teach me to respect nature.
I wanted to find out what animals used the land bridge. So I used the wildlife cameras we got at work and just set them up in various different locations to see what animals triggered the camera, what I could ID. I didn't have high hopes when I first put the cameras out. So the first time I sat down to look through my footage and I got footage of a badger was really exciting. It was just its bum going into the distance. I didn't catch its head or anything, but just to know that they were there. It was really amazing to see the wildlife crossing the bridge for the first time. And actually it's been really successful. We've had lots of deer, badgers, lots of different types of mice and voles. So it shows that if you do build a connective bridge for animals over a main road, they do actually use it. It means that there are solutions over having to build main roads. It means that we can leave the wildlife in their habitats rather than destroying them if we do need to build that infrastructure, which is great because it's always kind of looking for a happy medium.
So we're in one of the beautiful woodlands here at Cork Abbey, and Cork's really important because it's got a huge number of veteran trees and then these huge swathes of woodland, and we're situated right in the middle of the National Forest, and the National Forest for the past 30 years has planted up about 30% of the land within its boundary. So we've created a woodland within the Midlands, which is really important. We're the landowner that are providing the perfect habitat for the dormice to be located, so we've worked quite closely with People's Trust for Endangered Species to work out where would be the best place for this year's reintroduction.
Today is the day that all comes together. The healthy quarantined dormice come into the woodland. They'll go into soft release cages where they're fed by local volunteers while they're kept in cages to allow them to familiarise themselves with the woodland. And then after 10 days, small openings are made in the cages and the dormice are then free to come and go.
Today it was really rewarding to be out here with the volunteers, helping them put the dormice into their release cages and seeing them go into such a lovely environment. It's really amazing when you go along to the release site and you actually see your dormice being released, because we do get to know individuals. You want to follow their story as they go into the wild.
Dormice are a fabulous species. They're very enigmatic, they're very cute. But because they're nocturnal, they live in the tree and shrub canopy when they're active, so people very rarely get to see one. So when you can bring people that opportunity to see one up close, people are kind of, well, gobsmacked, I suppose, for want of a better word. It's an exciting animal to see. And I think the great thing from my point of view is if you get things right for dormice, it benefits a broad range of other species as well. So I think working with dormice is as much about the species, but also it's a lot about the volunteers that kind of work on the species as well. People like dormice, and it's a lovely thing to be involved with.